Welcome everybody to a very, very special episode of Token Tuesday. We got a very, very special guest, MrFOMO. We've got Mr. Dominic, and Mr. Dominic is very heavily into crypto, and he's, I would say, a VGX expert, and that's our token today. And he's not only going to talk about VGX, but we're not going to tell you exactly how many tokens he has. We both know, but let's just say he's put his money where his mouth is. So we're going to... Yeah, I mean, we know that VGX is the native token to Voyager. We know what Voyager does. It offers, I think, now over 65 cryptos. You get 7% interest. You're going to get access to a debit card, which is going to give you 3% back. There are currently 3 tiers. I'm not going to go through all of them because guess what? There's a new VLP coming next month. And, you know, Voyager is interesting. It really skyrocketed up into the 7 areas last February when I first got in. And it has struggled for the last 11 months, but a lot of people do believe it is an amazing buy to hold on to for the next 2 to 3 years. So Dom is a bit of an expert about rewards systems with his job. So why don't you give him the first question that our listeners will probably want to hear about in terms of VGX?
And real simple, what makes you so bullish on VGX?
You know, that's such a complex, loaded question. I mean, why not? I think is a better question. Look, if you really look at just the platform in general, there's so many things to be excited about. And really and truly, it's the roadmap. You have really sound leadership team. The market cap is non-exposed, right? I mean, there's still so much upside that you can get from it. And for me, it's just like, if you're looking at the crypto space and people coming to just the asset class, it makes perfect sense to join a platform that's seamless, it's intuitive, it's easy, and there's just so much to offer. So when I looked at all those variables, not to mention it's a public company, and for someone that was kind of entering the space, I really wanted to trust where I was putting my money, and that solidified it for me. And that was before Coinbase really kind of came on board. So I think all those things just made sense for me logically.
Yeah, and AZ and I have talked about that before. If we're going to have retail coming into the space en masse, you're going to have mass adoption. We're going to need them to be comfortable before they come in. And we've talked about how important that is. The problems that there have been with Binance, the problems that there have been with KuCoin, with all these other exchanges, you want that security of a company that's publicly traded and that takes care of its customers like that. And you mentioned the team. Just some quick notes I made: Stephen Ehrlich, Philip Aton, I'm probably not saying that right, Gaspar Dedruzzi, and Oscar Salazar. You're talking about companies like Lightspeed Financial, the former CEO of E-Trade, Morgan Stanley, Cerberus, founders of healthcare companies, Uber, founding investors of Uber, co-founders of healthcare startups. There's tons of history behind that team. Just those 4 people right there. And, that's one of the things that they talk about when you're looking at a coin is who is the team behind it. And I think you hit on that. That's a perfect example of how great this coin is.
Absolutely. I mean, I think from a reassuring perspective, anytime you get to buy in, even look at the Mavericks and Mark Cuban getting involved. I mean, for me, that solidifies just the upside that it has. And someone like Mark isn't going to go in and partner with a company that is going to be fly by night or isn't trusted. So again, it just adds to the legitimacy of the project.
Absolutely.
Tom, I wanted to ask you about CRO and BNB. Why is this a better investment than those 2?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to the market cap and what I was mentioning earlier. So consider right now that levels are depressed. I mean, are we in a bear? No one knows, but certainly we're trading sideways, and it's been like that for some time, and we've come down from all-time highs. But Crow's at roughly $11 billion market cap. BNB is at, I think, $76 billion today. Voyager VGX is at $600 million. So when you really, again, look at the upside, and they've hovered between, we've been like $1 billion now and then and kind of, fluctuating on the volatility. But for me, it just shows the immense potential.
Do you think we get to CRO's level in terms of customer acquisition and token price within the next? I don't want you to give a prediction just yet, but is it realistic for us to be, if you're a Voyager holder, expect them to be competitive with CRO within the next couple of years?
I definitely think so. When you look at just how they're modeling the roadmap and going to Crow, like they have the NFT space. I know Steve's mentioned that in the past. There's some discussion over a blockchain. For me, they're a couple of years behind where Crow's at. And if you look at the numbers in terms of users, downloads, funded accounts, the trajectory is certainly on the up and up. And, let's not even talk about, haven't even gone into New York State, Canada, Europe. And so for me, there's no reason not to think that they can't get to those levels or exceed it. And then you also have to consider from like the macro perspective of just the asset class, right? A few weeks ago or a month ago, you're at 2.5 trillion. I've heard numbers thrown out to $250 trillion. So as that is from the asset class, from a macro perspective, being solidified and continue to pump, they're going to participate in that for sure.
Now, me and Mr. FOMO and yourself are all part of the VLP. What would you like to see different in the new one that's coming out sometime in February? Steve said 4 to 6 weeks ago. This is a couple weeks ago. He reiterated in the last interview it was going to be in February. What would you like to see as an investor that would really get you excited about the new VLP?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that there's a few things. I mean, obviously the tokenomics kind of need to be massaged a little bit. There's some things that didn't really stack up. I know that the initial iteration of what they were looking at didn't really come to fruition. I'm not really sure all the reasons why, but clearly they identified that there needs to be some fine tuning. So the tokenomics are one thing, but the other thing is just looking at the tiers. And you had mentioned the 3 tiers before, and don't want to get into a whole lot of specifics just because we don't know what things are going to look like whenever the VLP 2.0. But I come from the airline sector. So most of my career, I spent 15 years in the industry, and I've gotten a lot of exposure with different airlines and their loyalty programs. And, it's not a secret. And I think a lot of people out on Twitter have commented about how airlines have used their loyalty programs as collateralized loans and, the peak of the pandemic. So it's really important to understand the equation and the things that go into that in terms of the formula. So if you look at, the VLP and the token price, you have to consider that it can't be everything to everyone, but it needs to be many things to many people. And for me, the big thing that's lacking is a lower tier. You can get, I think it's 100 tokens right now to get the 7% interest. But that's only the interest component. And there's a lot of other things that maybe people want to participate in. So I think the best way to describe it is if you're a frequent flyer, right? And you're a family, you might value the extra baggage. And so you're going to participate in the loyalty program because you get free checked bags. But if you're a consistent traveler for work, you might want to be boarding the plane so you don't have to worry about your bag getting checked if you have a meeting and time is, of the essence. And if you're a road warrior, right, you want the upgrades. So what I'm saying is that there's a lot of different things that appeal, but the biggest obstacle is that they don't have a lower enough tier. You have to create demand and get people interested in, and then from there, build upon the engagement. The second thing I'll say within that is the gap is just too big from 5,000 to 20,000. They have to create something in between it because you need to get people to continue to buy into it and keep stacking and buying up. So I think if they're able to address those two things, it's a huge step in the right direction.
Now, Mr. FOMO, I know you are super pumped about the debit card. I think you would like to probably take this one because I know you can't wait to get your hands on. What are some questions you might have about the debit card, Mr. FOMO, that's coming?
My biggest question, and I think Steve has spoken of this a couple of times, but my biggest question is, does it create a taxable event for me when I spend?
Great question.
Some of that is going to be rewards or interest, right? And so my concern is that I will create these taxable events over and over again, depending on how much I spend.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting thing. I mean, for me, it's just my perspective, right? Is anytime you're swiping, as long as it's in USDC, it shouldn't become a taxable event. The rewards that you're getting because of that, as a result of that, I think it's going to be dependent upon what you choose to do with them. There might be some type of income, interest, the valuation of those. But of course, not financial advice, go seek tax.
That's why we're not financial advisors.
Yeah.
And then that's another question is, how am I, what happens with my rewards? I'm getting VGX as a reward, as that goes up, what happens to that? We've had some people, in the government, I don't know how far that'll go, but they've talked about taxing unrealized gains. And so my concern is once you start getting those rewards, if they end up doing something like that, would I end up having a taxable event there too? But that's a long way off.
But as far as we know, Steve, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. Steve did say that whenever you use the debit card, it's not a taxable event.
Right.
No. Dom, you correct me if I'm wrong.
No, it's correct. It shouldn't be a taxable event.
Let's say you earned 200 VGX. You pay all your bills, you get that back. If you sell it, obviously that's a taxable event. If that VGX stays, it's not taxable because it's just, you know what I mean? You've earned those rewards. You haven't sold for profit. So really, for me, and I could be wrong, but this is the way I interpreted Steve's episode when he's been on, until you actually sell your VGX, there is no taxable event. So you can, like right now, you're getting the 7%. You can obtain as much VGX as you'd like. And the beauty is, unless they change it, and it would get better, not worse, you can get as much as 3% back. You can pay a mortgage bill. You can pay a water bill. You can pay an electric bill. You're going to make a ton of VGX. And the one thing I wanted you to point out, right now, Voyager.
Credit card.
Yeah. Right now, Voyager is using tokens they've already allotted to pay people back. But when that runs out, what's going to happen, Dom, is how is that going to help price?
Well, I mean, it's going to create a supply shock. In simple terms, they're going to have to go out to the open market and purchase those. I was reading somewhere, I think 200,000 people have already signed up for the debit card. And so when you look at the usage on that, I mean, for me, it's just a simple math game.
So now our favorite part, and Mr. FOMO, you can ask, I'm going to ask the big question, and then you can ask about Bitcoin and its relationship to VGX. Dom, realistically, we got our next halving in 2024. So this year is very unpredictable. Honestly, we don't know what kind of market we're in. Let's say we go sideways, and no one's going to hold you to this, but it's not going to 100 this year. Let's just be realistic with our audience. 50 is a very tall ask. But let's say we go sideways, we end up somewhere in the 50s. But let's say, it's not a bear, not a bull. We're just in this new awkward sideways. Let's say, and a lot of people do think this, a lot of people think that the cycles have been broken now. That's what a lot of people think. Some people think we're about to start a bear. Some people think we're about to go back but let's just scenario. Let's say BTC kind of hovers between here and 55. What is a realistic, let's assume that the new VLP is success. What is a realistic, when I drafted, I did predict 10 in 3 months, and then I said 30 was possible. But I was assuming at that point that the VLP was coming out earlier. So honestly, those predictions I had are probably way off. For you as an investor, what's your realistic expectation by the end of this year?
Yeah, I mean, before I get into that, I'll just say that, you mentioned the cycle. For me, from the health of just Bitcoin and asset class, I think it's good if the cycle's broken because it will eliminate that extreme volatility and the deep dips. But if anything, it's certainly been elongated. And I think that that's where you're kind of getting some of the sideways and people kind of trying to figure out how things are going to go. So, for me, realistically, I think, $12 is probably a very sound point, price prediction to really get into it. Last year, people were saying $30. I even saw some people saying 45 or 50. I'm not sure how realistic some of that stuff is. But look, I think at the end of the day, it's all, again, it goes back to the market cap and in terms of what things can truly be. So $12 for me is definitely doable at the end of this year. If things really go right and Steve and the team is able to execute the roadmap and hit all their benchmarks, I think 2025 is definitely doable.
Okay, we're in 2024. Let's say we're going to call it not a traditional, but we're going well. It's a bull type run after the halving. We've got Europe in, we've got lending, the VLPs in full force. People are using the debit card. At that point, again, we're not going to hold you to this, but we'll have you back to celebrate if it hits.
Okay.
End of 2024, early 2025, about 3 years from now, at that point, what do you think we could be at? Possibly. Say things go well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, 65 to 75 is kind of the sweet spot. I'm analytical in nature, and when I model and everything, I kind of do a min real max perspective. So my real is 65 to 75. I think on the min, 40, 45, I think would be a disappointment. but certainly it should be there. And then on the upper end, 95, but let's just round it to 100 because 100 sounds cleaner.
And Mr. FOMO, we want to remind our viewers the token price right now is 229. So even Mr. FOMO, even if you buy now and it goes down a little bit, if what Dom says, what other experts saying happen, you're not going to be sad.
Well, that's one thing that we always talk about is that if your expectation of something is that it's going to be much higher, what does it matter if you buy it at $2 or $3 or $4? We talk about that Friday DCA that the VGX heroes have us doing and we participate in. It doesn't really matter as long as you continue to buy it before it gets to 100, right? And so if that's your belief, is that on the low end that it's $12 this year, 45 sometime in the future, 100 after that, then to me it doesn't really matter. And like you said, it's a no-brainer. But there was something that I wanted to touch on. I wanted to circle back. Oh, you talked about the bear market and broken cycles, and I was a big believer in broken cycles. And I think you see we both have our bear market beards going. And I've always talked to AJ. I think it's a bit of gambler's logic to look at the past and think it has to repeat. Oh, it's going to be just like 2017. We're going to get a double top. And even if that's what you're looking for, we really did get that. We got a double top, even though it wasn't as explosive as everybody thought. And then AJ pointed out we never got our altcoin season, and to me it makes sense that we wouldn't. With now there's 12,000 altcoins across the market. All that money is going to be naturally spread out across those coins, so you're not going to see that huge pump that you have in the past. Right. And so I can see where a lot of these things are already breaking down already to where you may not have that huge downside volatility. And this may actually be this trading sideways may actually be a bear market. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I think it's a very valid point, right? People always talk about, Bitcoin's dominance, right? And they always look at the percentage. I think where it's somewhat flawed is to what you said is there's so many more altcoins now that the distribution between them, just by simple math terms, it has to not be the same weight because there's, you're not comparing apples to apples.
Right.
So yeah, certainly I think that it's true. But again, I think from the long-term health of the asset class, it's not a horrible thing. And oh, by the way, we're focusing a lot on VGX price, but for me, where I see is the true utility. And I think, as the VLP evolves, and Steve said that they're going to continue to make adjustments, they're going to use data. Maybe there's going to be a VLP 3.0, but it's all the benefits that you're getting along the way. And so for me, that's where I tend to look out further in the horizon and have patience, not focus about if it's $2 or $3, because it's exactly what you said, that long term, that's the most important aspect. It's what it's going to be 3, 4, 5 years. And if you're reaping rewards along the way, there's no reason not to be patient.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and to be totally honest, Dom has several times calmed me down after I've been upset with some of the lack of movement. But I've come to the realization, even though I did take it in our draft, our altcoin draft, this is not a 3, 4, 5 week, 1 month, 2 month. This is several years, because the reality is, like Dom said, Voyager is not right now where Coinbase and Crypto.com is. Where even where Binance is. It's just not there. It's too new. I mean, we went from 100,000 users to 1 million in a amount of 5 or 6 months. So it's grown, but it's still, if you remember, they've had to hire a lot of people recently. It was just small. It was a small company. And that was one of the reasons why they had some outages earlier in the year. They grew much faster than they expected. I think the coin grew faster than they expected, and there was a natural retrace. People took profits. So now I think this is where kind of maybe it could be higher, because I don't know if the VLP was executed 100%. But now we're going to see if the new VLP, how it goes. We're going to see if it's really going to work. And we're going to see if these, he's not the only one, Dom, you're not the only one. A lot of people have high expectations. We're going to see if these are met or not. Proof's going to be in the pudding in the next couple of years for sure. Mr. FOMO, do you have anything else to ask?
There's a couple of things. I love their partnership with Particle and what they're doing with high dollar art. and selling, you know, the NFTs or the pieces, the particles of the or the high dollar art. Disappointed that I missed out on the Banksy. Did you hit the Banksy? Did you get in on that?
No, I attempted to, but I wasn't lucky enough to make the cut. But next time, for sure.
Yeah, no, I missed on it by about an hour. AJ texted me, and I think I was Christmas shopping with the family or something. So
I didn't get it either, but you know, hopefully there'll be a better process for stuff.
Yeah.
Again,
I was disappointed I missed on a Banksy. That was if there's anything in art, that would have been it.
One more quick, we got to sneak this in because you're a numbers guy, Dom, and you're an expert. Again, we're not going to hold you to this. BTC after the next halving, a year later, we're talking about end of 2004, 2025. What do you see? I personally think we're going to be over 250,000. Again, we're not financial experts. I think BTC is going over 250 in the next 2 to 3 years. Where do you see it?
No, I think I would echo. I think I would echo exactly what you said. I think 250 is certainly reasonable. I know a lot of people were throwing out that 100,000 number at the end of 2021. You know, some of it I think was linked to if there was going to be an ETF and not the futures ETF, but you know the other one, the spot. And I just think that too many people kind of bought into that and into the hype. But for me, it's inevitable. So we're sitting here, we're talking about timing when. It's not about if, it's just when.
Right.
All right, Dom, thank you so much for joining us. I think Mr. FOMO.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah. Why not? We first guest of the show. Take it away.
All right, we've talked about Europe and VGX or Voyager opening in Europe, and AJ and I spoke some today at work about what we thought was going to happen with Europe because they're in lockdown. A lot of Europe is in lockdown because of coronavirus, Omicron, you know, these new variants that keep coming out. And crypto really got a boost when Americans and the rest of the world were in lockdown. Do you think that with Europe in lockdown, with them sort of not really being able to go out and spend their money, Voyager opening, do you think that will have a boost, or do you think lockdown in Europe will be a little bit different this time?
No, I mean, I think it could be a boost, but I think the thing that maybe people aren't really focusing on is the inflationary aspects and what's actually going on in Europe. I think that could actually be a driving force, because if you look at, you know, just the general economic environment, you know, BTC, they're saying should be a hedge. I think there's going to be other forces that are driving those call to actions, and VGX for me is just a natural pull. And so I think people will marry the two together and see the benefit. Again, it's just a seamless platform. So I think that when you look at it from that perspective, there's a lot of elements that could really come into play to, you know, create that call to action.
Yeah, I would agree. Thank you. And we've said before, we think VGX and BTC are probably in the same category as far as stores of value. But to me, I think it's better. I think VGX is better because you're getting rewards on your BTC for holding VGX. But
right. And so for me, you know, I kind of talk about my portfolio, and we won't get into all the other things, but, you know, BTC is obviously a core element, USDC, VGX. And so when you look at it from that aspect and you really make sense of it all, you combine all the different rewards and the elements that come from it. To me, it's a no-brainer. And you're absolutely right. You can make the argument that those that have a high quantity of BTC want to be on Voyager because of the interest, which then makes sense to hold more VGX. You could also use the reverse logic too.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, thank you so much. And you know what, when we hit 10 or higher, we're going to have you back on to celebrate.
Let's do it.
Who knows when that'll happen, but then you can give us your new feel. And by then we'll have a new VLP, I'm sure. So
yeah, there'll be a lot more to discuss.
That's your expertise. We'll be glad to have you on. Guys, please hit that like button. Please subscribe. We want to get to as many subscribers as we can by the end of January. For Mr. FOMO, for Dom, this is AZcrypto. You guys have an amazing night, and we'll see you at the end of the week.
Thanks, guys.